Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. It is episode 3 of the Dropkicks and Attractions podcast. I am, of course, your host with the most, the Prince of Pop Culture. I am, of course, Xander Invictus, joined by, as Mean Gene would say, my close personal friend, BigBoct. How are you, sir?
I am doing just fine. How about yourself?
I am doing wonderful, thank you. And speaking of thank yous, I want to thank everyone for all the fantastic feedback and everybody checking us out on the first 2 episodes. We've been getting good feedback. People are enjoying it, so we're going to give you more what you like.
Alrighty, and today we're going to wrestling from the week of January 18th, 1993. That's going to be an episode of Raw and an episode of WCW Saturday Night.
Absolutely, and we are going to jump into Monday Night Raw of the January 18th. We are still at the Manhattan Center in New York City, where we were the week prior. And it is a go-home show for the Royal Rumble. For those that are not familiar with wrestling terminology, the go-home show, especially for television shows, will be the last show before pay-per-view. So we're finalizing matches, storylines, making sure everything's ready to go before the pay-per-view.
Right. Now, the show's going to open with Vince, Bartlett, and Savage, our commentary team.
Sure, and while we're doing this, Rob Bartlett shows a picture of Bobby Heenan and tears it up.
Yeah, he says, "Fight the real enemy." I'm not sure what that's a reference to.
This is where my knowledge of all kinds of crazy stuff comes in, and this is where the pop culture helix twisted. Back in 1992, it was less than a year before this, on Saturday Night Live, you know how Saturday Night Live has their musical guests?
Right.
Sinead O'Connor, pop star Sinead O'Connor, was the musical guest, and she was doing the song War by Bob Marley. For those that are not, most people have seen Saturday Night Live, so they know there's usually 2 songs. Each musical guest will have 2 songs on the show. So Sinead O'Connor did the song War by Bob Marley. And at the end of it, she held up a picture of then Pope John Paul II, said, "Fight the real enemy," and then tore it up in pieces on live television.
I had not heard about that. What was that, a reference to something going on at the time?
It was just, just the whole Irish, a lot of the problems with, Catholicism and that sort of thing. She was not a fan of that sort of thing.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, now it's coming back to me.
And everybody absolutely went livid because she was like, hey, I want to do, the idea was, on the last word of the song, she was going to hold up a picture of, it would have been like a homeless child or some sort of child in distress. They're like, that's fine, we get that, you can do that. So she had the okay to do that. She did not have the okay to tear up the picture of the Pope.
Okay, yeah, I see where this is going.
Yeah, and so she was banned. Lorne Michaels, the executive producer of Saturday Night Live, banned her permanently from the show.
Oh my.
And if I'm correct, that was I don't think she came back to do her second song. I don't remember if that was her first or second song. And if that was her first one, she never came back for the second. Which, very rarely does that ever happen. And there's only a few instances where guests have never been asked to return or they've been banned from the show. So this was a big deal.
I can imagine. Saturday Night Live was huge back in those days.
Oh, 93, 92, it was still massive. And so Bartlett did the same thing with Heenan because he's trying to have this feud with Heenan for some reason. And the funny thing is if you looked at Vince McMahon's face when Bartlett's tearing up the picture, Vince McMahon could not really care. He's like, the look was like, yeah, okay, cool, this is something. I also want to notice before we get into this that Rob Bartlett is very much subdued he's still horrible, but you can tell that somebody must have said something to him after the first show because he's nowhere near as blatant as he was last week.
He's taking it down a notch.
Yeah, so obviously somebody had to say something to him, but like I said, he's going to be gone within the first few months. I think he's gone before SummerSlam, so...
Yeah, moving on from that, unless you have something else to say.
Well, no, what had happened is Vince is getting ready to go over the card, and while this is happening, Repo Man comes out and waylays Macho Man, Randy Savage, from behind and steals his cowboy hat.
Yeah, that's a real quick sequence, and right after that, we cut to the theme song.
Yes. Once we come back to the ring and we have the ring, I thought that was funny is before we cut to the theme song, I noticed that there for a while, especially normally just the very beginning, they had ring girls like you would normally see in boxing matches.
Yeah, I noticed that.
With the card showing the rim. And I thought it was funny because you're showing, Repo Man laying out Macho Man. And while this is going on, you see the pretty girl in the ring while, she's not caring what's happening. She's still walking around the ring holding up the ring card while Macho Man's writhing on the ground. I just found that humorous myself.
Yeah, the incongruity of it was, amusing.
Sure. And so we go to the first match of this episode, and I didn't recognize the song offhand of who was coming out, and it was actually Terry Taylor, who had been around in wrestling basically since the 80s. Has come back as basically just your standard heel character. He was basically known in WWF around WrestleMania 4 and 5 as the Red Rooster. He had a whole storyline with Bobby Heenan, basically saying, I can do whatever I want with you, I can make you, made him the Red Rooster. He actually had a red mohawk and crowed like a rooster. That was his thing.
I had not heard of that one.
And his opponent for this, and I'm actually kind of excited for this match just because how good both of them were, was Mr. Perfect, who is legit in my top 5 all time. When I was training in wrestling, it was actually somebody whose videos I watched a lot, and was the reason I was really working on doing a fisherman suplex in my moveset was Mr. Perfect.
Gotcha. Now, while this is going on, one of the running gags of the show is Bartlett saying something about where he parked. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure at the time where that was going.
Sure, and we'll obviously get the payoff on that at the end. And what a lot of people don't realize is, Curt Hennig absolutely killed it with the Mr. Perfect gimmick. But a lot of people don't realize is that before he got the gimmick, they were actually going to give the Mr. Perfect gimmick to Terry Taylor himself.
That's another thing I hadn't heard. Again, it's my inexperience compared to how long you've been watching.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the reason this is something I knew before we started doing this podcast, and in just all the research I've done, I keep seeing that the main reason that Curt Hennig got it over Terry Taylor was the fact that they felt that one of the weaknesses, because technically Terry Taylor was very sound technically in the ring, but they felt that he didn't have the charisma that you would need for being called Mr. Perfect.
And that's just the way it goes with a performance sport like this. You need to be able to work the crowd.
With the gimmick, if you're going to be called Mr. Perfect, you're going to have to do this. So yeah, they're jaw jacking, they're doing a little posturing, trying to size each other up. Macho Man comes back looking for his hat. The first part, they're feeling each other out, doing a little bit of light chain wrestling, and they actually call in Bobby Heenan, who's talking garbage to Bartlett. They're still having this feud, and I thought it was funny is that how Bobby Heenan was able to sneak a plug-in for All American Wrestling, which is one of the weekend shows that he's a commentator on.
I actually missed that part.
Yeah, he's like, oh, you don't understand who I am. I'm Bobby Heenan. I commentate for All American Wrestling, noon on Sundays on USA. Like, he was able to just, Bobby Heenan was amazing on the microphone. That's why he was considered one of the all-time great managers. And he was able to sneak in a plug, talking garbage to Rob Bartlett while sneaking into a plug for his show that he commentates for on the weekends. It just shows you how good Bobby Heenan was.
So yeah, being able to talk like that, work it in, kind of maybe get it by anyone who might not want to plug for another company.
Well, no, that was a WWF show.
Oh, it was? I didn't realize that.
That was one of their weekend shows.
Oh, okay.
It was usually around Sunday at noon. This is when, most wrestling was on the weekends.
Now, as the match goes on, I'm noting that Mr. Perfect is using arm bars a lot on Terry.
Curt Hennig always had the basics down. Like, he was trained, he came from the Minnesota area, was trained in the AWA, which was known, this was one of the big promotions back in the 70s and 80s, and that's where Curt Hennig got started. And they were known for their very technical grappling style, so obviously, that's going to be what he picks up, and it was just something he was always very good at.
Right.
As we go, they ended up going to a commercial, and it was funny as like Vince like, yeah, well, we'll be right back, and Bobby Heenan's getting pissed because he's like, what? Hey, don't go to commercial. I'm on the phone. What are you doing? Hey, I'm over here. Pay attention. And then they come back, and then you see that Terry Taylor is actually like nothing. There's nothing of note that's happened in this match yet. It's very basic feeling out process. Slight chain wrestling, nothing crazy has happened as of yet. So they come back from commercial, and Terry Taylor is now in control. Heenan's still on the phone, and then Mr. Perfect makes a comeback, and Terry Taylor catches him with a quite nice spine buster.
Yeah, there's a lot of 2 counts in this match that I saw.
Yeah, you could see where, you could see where technically Terry Taylor and Mr. Perfect were very equal when it came to their wrestling acumen. Hennig gets his comeback, and he goes for a reverse atomic drop. Sometimes it's called a Manhattan drop, and he gets some ridiculous height on that. Like, there was a great spot where you could tell that was both of them, where they were able to get some ridiculous height, exaggerated height on the atomic drop.
Yeah, right after that, I see what I'm pretty sure I recognize as the natural selection that Charlotte Flair used to use.
No, in a way, Hers was more of like a neck breaker face buster. They were on their knees. What he did was more of a neck snap. Basically, he did almost like a snap bear, and he would kind of like, instead of them falling in like a neck breaker face buster type move like she does, it was just he would grab their neck as he flipped over them to kind of like drive it down and just snap their head back really harsh into the in the mat. Which ironically, not only did you try to add to my moveset, because once again I watched a lot of Kurt Hennig in training. Terry Taylor was known as Terrence Taylor for a while in WCW he's gone back and forth between both promotions. He was known as Terrence Taylor, and that actually was his finisher in WCW, was that exact same neck snap.
I gotcha. Yeah, like I said, to me it looked like natural selection, but thanks for the background on that.
Sure, no, like, absolutely, I can see where you come in from. Speaking of Charlotte Flair, thank you for the segue, while this is going on, Ric Flair comes out in his robe, and of course, and so we come in, and he's having that feud with Mr. Perfect. They're having a kerfuffle, and he comes out and causes a distraction to Mr. Perfect, and Taylor takes advantage of that, drives a knee into Mr. Perfect, dumping him to the outside, and he's able to distract the referee while Ric Flair just starts dropping hammers down on him.
Yeah, Flair throws Perfect back into the ring after that, and then Terry goes for a move, but Mr. Perfect is able to get the pin by reversing into a bridging suplex.
Yeah, like you could tell that Terry Taylor was going for a suplex, and it was just so smooth that the way Kurt was able to counter that smoothly into his own perfect plex finisher.
Yeah, that was a really good sequence.
Yeah, there was no wasted motion. It was just boom, perfect plex or the fisherman suplex, and he got the win.
And that's a match time of 8 minutes and 3 seconds.
And it was a great match. I mean, it was technically sound. I mean, there was no like, oh my God spots, but it was still a great match overall.
Yeah, like we said last time, sometimes all you need is good fundamentals.
Yeah. And we could tell, I'm just going to say that right now, this is actually a better episode of Raw than last week's debut.
All right, next segment is an interview with Bret Hart by Vince. They're talking up the title match between Bret and Razor Ramon at the Royal Rumble.
Sure. Actually, before that, we saw you got Lord Alfred Hayes talking about the promotional consideration paid for by the following. And they showed 2 commercials. And the second one they showed was the classic Macho Man doing the snap into a Slim Jim commercial.
Oh, yeah, I remember those from when I was growing up. Like, I knew Macho Man's name because of those.
Oh, yeah. And matter of fact, if you look and you go a lot of places that sell Slim Jims, there actually is now, still to this day, a savage-sized Slim Jim. It's probably almost a foot long and probably a half-inch around. And it's got a picture of Macho Man. It's called their Savage Size, and it's just this huge, gigantic, massive Slim Jim.
Yeah, I don't really eat Slim Jims, so I've never had a reason to look for it. But I might check that out around this area and see if I can find those.
And the other one I want to talk about was you saw Bret Hart in a gym, and that actually is the actual gym they have at WWF, WWE, whatever headquarters. That's the actual gym inside the building.
Right. Yeah, that was for integrated conditioning programs, right? They
called it, or IcoPro. It was just called IcoPro, and that was actually a, supplements, protein, that sort of thing, owned by Vince McMahon. That was a WWF product, a Vince McMahon product that mainly came from his World Bodybuilding Federation. He tried to start his own bodybuilding promotion. That's a fun story, and that actually coincides with somebody's debut in the Royal Rumble, so I'll save that story for our next episode when we do talk about the Royal Rumble.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I just wanted to show those commercials because that just shows you the kind of, those weren't, obviously they're not going to show the commercials that were normally seen.
Yeah, that were on TV at the time.
Sure, but I just want to show those 2 because that's absolutely, I remember those commercials as a kid.
Right, and it ties into the branding they were doing.
Absolutely. So, like you said, we were going into the interview with Bret Hart about his match with Razor Ramon at the Royal Rumble for the title.
Yeah, the main things Bret tries to get across here. Number 1, attacking me is one thing. Going after my family is another thing.
Sure, and he mentions Stu Hart, which was his father, and you keep hearing about the Hart family dungeon to this day, where Stu actually trained basically every Hart in the family that wrestled. And he also trained people like Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. He had a hand in helping tighten up Dynamite Kid. He trained Chris Benoit. He trained Brian Pillman.
It's just a well-respected family in wrestling and well-respected training, it sounds like.
Basically, if you came out, if you ever hear stories about how rough the training was, if you came out of the dungeon, you could wrestle. We'll just put it that way. Not everybody finished there, but if you could finish there, you could go. And just if you saw the list, Jim Neidhart came out of the dungeon. Yeah, so if you came out of the dungeon, you can go, basically. And like I said, this was a great basic promo saying, come at me, fine. You come at my family, I'm going to kick you, I'm going to kick your ass. The line that I got out of this that I just found humorous, Bret Hart said he's going to kick Razor Ramon. He's going to kick him down Unconscious Street. That's just one of those lines I just pick up that I like that line.
Yeah, the second point Bret made was Razor Ramon is not at the bottom of the barrel. He is underneath the barrel, just showing how little he thinks of him at the time.
Yeah.
And then the last thing was, I'm the best wrestler, but this match with Razor is going to be a fight, not a wrestling match.
Yeah, and it's like I said, there was obviously Bret Hart at the time was the technical. Razor Ramon was always a brawler. He was a fighter.
Right, so it's going to be a clash of styles when we get to the Royal Rumble.
And the fun fact, speaking of Royal Rumble, we all know that Razor Ramon is, Scott Hall, who goes on to Hall of Fame career, goes all over the place, wins titles everywhere. With all the tenures he had in WWF, as either Scott Hall or Razor Ramon, he was never in the Royal Rumble match himself. He had a lot of times he had matches at the Royal Rumble. He was never in the match itself, ever. Interesting
little note there. I might have picked up on that as we go forward, but probably not, knowing me.
Yeah, you would expect especially somebody who has a Hall of Fame career like Scott Hall, he would have at least one appearance in the Royal Rumble. He was always on the card, never in the match itself.
All right, yeah, that's an interesting little note. Good trivia.
So we go to the next match. Is Marty Jannetty versus Glenn Ruth.
Now, at this time, Bartlett is still talking about his car, and I'm just like, dude, nobody cares.
Yeah, we'll get a payoff for it, but it's just, once again, we're going to reiterate until he's no longer on here. Neither one of us is a fan of Rob Bartlett as a commentator.
Not in the slightest.
So yeah, we're going up against Marty Jannetty versus Glenn Ruth, and if the name Glenn Ruth sounds familiar, he would go on to become Thrasher of the Headbangers, one of the more popular tag teams in the Attitude Era. Mosh and Thrasher's the Headbangers. And also, Mosh and Thrasher do become tag team champions, but Marty Jannetty sorta, kinda, but not really was a tag team champion with Shawn Michaels as the Rocker. It happened, but not really.
How do you mean, not really?
Okay. So, once again, this is, we're coming off the breakup of the Rockers, which was one of my favorite tag teams as a child. The quick, bright colors, that sort of thing.
Right.
They were never officially, they're never going to be on the record as WWF Tag Team Champs. What had happened is that there was, for Saturday Night's Main Event, which was that basically a seasonal show they would have in place of usually like a Saturday Night Live or a primetime show, kind of like how we talked about Clash of the Champions, Saturday Night's Main Event was sort of kind of the same concept.
Okay.
But there was a match they recorded, or taped rather, was the Hart Foundation, who were the tag champs at the time, versus the Rockers. And during the match, the top rope breaks, which is just hazard. It happens. You've seen it. I've seen it happen before in wrestling. Top rope breaks for whatever reason.
Gotcha.
The Rockers win the match, so they're supposed to have become tag team champions. But for some reason, because the top rope broke during the match, they decided, the powers that be backstage decided that the match didn't count. So the belts never officially changed hands.
I had never heard of something like that before.
Yeah, no, it was weird. They won, but because the ring ropes broke, we're going to throw out that match and it doesn't count. So even though technically the Rockers won the titles, they never became world champions. And if you look in the title history, that's why you never see the Rockers as tag champs.
Gotcha.
Sort of, you had a Phantom tag champ going up against a future tag champ in this.
And as the match starts, Marty offers a handshake. Glenn accepts, then Marty turns his back and Glenn goes crazy.
And that's about the total offense Glenn Ruth has the entire match. And it wasn't and even as we knew this was going to be a squash match, Glenn Ruth is going to be your enhancement talent for this match. It wasn't a bad match. This wasn't a quick...
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, Jannetty got a real chance to show off what he could do.
Sure, and we understand a lot of times, especially nowadays, Marty Jannetty's known for all his unfortunate incidences that have happened to him over the last couple decades. He had with his problems. We're not going to elaborate, but everybody knows that he's had problems in the past. But what people forget is he was very sound technically.
This is a chance for him to show that.
Yeah, and it showed it very well. And speaking of Shawn Michaels, they were able to have him call in, and they were basically, this match was just to help promote the match that's coming up at the Royal Rumble for the Intercontinental title with Shawn Michaels defending against Marty Jannetty, where Sensational Sherry is going to be in somebody's corner, but they don't know who yet.
Right, Sean's talking that up, like all the women love him.
Yeah, because basically there was a moment during this feud where people, and because that was when he became the Heartbreak Kid, that was what his first manager was, Sensational Sherry. And if you ever listen to his more rare Heartbreak Kid theme song, and you hear the female singing it instead of the male voice, because that was the first one.
Yeah, they had that in the first episode, I believe.
That's Sherry Martel singing it, so she actually was singing his theme song first.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, that's her voice. But there was a moment where they're having the feud. They had, they were still using the weekend shows to promote stuff. Sherry Martel accidentally gets a mirror bashed against her head.
Ouch.
Because Shawn kind of sacrificed her. He's like, oh, the ladies love me, but I'm going to hide behind my manager. Because, he's cocky, but he's still, I'm going to hide.
Right.
So the idea is that, and then Marty was the one that kind of like, it was like, she's caught in between them, and this is just, we don't know where she's going to be when this match happens.
Right.
And like I said, this was just a showcase to show what Marty Jannetty could do, and he actually wins with the rocker dropper is what he called it.
Okay, I wasn't sure what that move was called.
Yeah, he called it the rocker dropper. It does look like the famouser that Billy Gunn would use and still uses to this day, but the version that Marty Jannetty does when he kind of hooks the arm like that, if that does look familiar to more modern fans, that was the version that Kelly used as her finisher when she called it the K2, where she kind of hooked the arm before she did it. It was closer to Marty Jannetty's version of the rocker.
Gotcha, and that's a 5-minute and 12-second match, so surprising for what was basically an enhancement match.
Yeah, but it still wasn't bad.
Right.
And then speaking of continuing feuds, they come back from commercial and show a replay of Superstars, which is another one of their weekend shows.
That was a weekend morning show, I think, right?
Yeah, they were both. They would usually be like on the weekends. It would be during the mornings, or sometimes usually like noon, 1 o'clock, like morning, early afternoon shows, like your Manias, Superstars. WCW had WCW Pro. This was Monday Night Raw was the first real big live weekly primetime wrestling show.
Now, on that cutback to Superstars, we're watching Doink the Clown versus Crush.
No, it wasn't versus Crush. Crush had just won a match, and Doink is actually out there with his arm in a sling.
Right.
They're continuing their food. Doink's like, please don't hurt me. Oh, my arm. Ow, ow. And if you look, you can obviously see the hand's flat. You know it's a fake arm because even the hand where the glove's at, that's a flat hand.
Yeah, it's not very convincing.
No. But obviously, hey, suspend your disbelief.
Right.
So he has a flower, this big old flower. Crush is giving him the look, and he's just like, yeah, whatever, dude. He grabs the flower, hands it to a kid, and as soon as Crush turns his back, what? The arm was fake, and he basically beats Crush senseless with his arm. They come back, and Vince is like, yeah, we come to find out that was filled with lead, and Crush has a concussion, and they're not sure if he's going to be able to make it for the Royal Rumble.
After that, we cut to Sean Mooney interviewing the Repo Man outside the Manhattan Center, and he does indeed have Randy Savage's hat.
The thing I have found humorous with that, though, is that we're looking at about 45 minutes show. This is about 25 minutes in. They're thrown out there, and he's like, well, we're looking for the Repo Man. I seem to have located him, and it looks like Repo Man is just strolling out the front door. And I'm thinking, once again, you gotta suspend your disbelief. It's like, if he's trying to escape with the hat, why is he still there almost a half an hour after he stole it, and it's just strolling out the front door?
Yeah, again, you suspend your disbelief, but if you look at it critically, it doesn't hold up.
But no, it was just good. It wasn't that all this was horrible. No, it was kind of goofy. It's like, you've been dancing around for half an hour? Cool. That's fine. And I also found out that Sean, he's got the earpiece in. It's like, oh, you're not going to believe all this garbage that Macho Man was talking about you right now. Randy Savage hadn't said anything at all. And Sean's like, oh. It's almost like Sean's trying to spark the fight.
Right.
And then Savage does get Repo gets the earpiece and they start talking shit to each other. And it's just, honestly, as goofy as this was, I loved it because you got to think about wrestling, especially in the early 90s. You got two grown men in bright costumes. Repo Man's got a friggin' domino mask. He's got tire treads over him. Randy Savage is full of fringe and neon colors. You got these two grown men in these garish costumes fighting over a cowboy hat.
When you put it like that, it does sound kind of ridiculous.
And I loved it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being a little silly now and then.
No, and it worked. So we cut back to the great legendary Mean Gene Oakland to the Royal Rumble Control Center. Like I said, the Royal Rumble is going to be that coming Sunday. So they were talking about the title match between Bret Hart and Razor Ramon. They cut to remarks to Razor Ramon, who basically says, I have gold around my neck, I got gold on my fingers, and come Sunday, I'm going to have gold around my waist.
Yeah, after that, we have another round of Royal Rumble participants.
So, and a lot of these were not announced last week. We're just adding more names, and they added Undertaker, the Berserker, IRS, Yokozuna, Mr. Perfect, Typhoon, Repo Man, Ric Flair, who won last year's, Papa Shango, who most people know now, but at the time didn't realize he would go on to become the Godfather. Same guy.
Did not know that one.
Hall of Famer, actually.
Oh, wow.
And $1 million Man, Ted DiBiase. And they also, the other match they promote during this segment is the Intercontinental title match. They're still saying, hey, what corner is Sherry going to be in? We don't know. Call your pay-per-view provider now.
Back outside with Sean, we've got Randy Savage has come up. He's trying to find Repo Man. In the meantime, Bartlett still won't shut up about his car.
And then we go to, quote-unquote, the main event of the night, which on paper I'm excited about, is El Matador versus Ric Flair. And El Matador is obviously Hall of Famer Tito Santana, former Intercontinental Champion, and he's also a former Tag Team Champion. And I just love the idea where it's like, we're going to give ethnic gimmicks because you look close, is that he's a Matador. Matador is traditionally a Spanish, it's a quote-unquote sport, a bullfighter. You traditionally find those in Spain. It's a Spanish tradition. Where's Tito Santana from?
He's from Spain, then.
He's from Mexico.
Oh, Mexico. Duh, I feel silly.
He's also billed from Mexico.
Oh.
But he's playing a Spanish bullfighter billed from Mexico.
Okay, now it makes sense.
It makes sense by not making sense.
Sure.
And obviously Ric Flair, we know Ric Flair, but this was towards the end of Tito Santana's main run. This is what he came back as, was El Matador. But if you, on paper, like if you ever watched some of the early 80s Tito Santana, in their prime, this match would have been amazing. If you would have given him like 30 minutes, this match would have been stupendous.
Now, Randy Savage is back to the commentary desk as the match starts. Some rope bounces, Flair gets knocked down.
And this is what I noticed first off in the match. Obviously, Flair, big heel in this match, big heel at this point. There's a lot of Let's Go Flair chants right now. And like, not even a little, there's a lot.
Yeah, the chants for Tito were very loud as well.
But it's just surprisingly that, well, I mean, yeah, you're going to cheer Tito Santana. He's always been the good guy, I think, for the majority of his career. But when you got Ric Flair, who's obviously one of your top heels, and he's getting chants comparable to Tito Santana's.
Yeah, something's going weird.
But I get it. It's whatever. But it's just something I picked up at. And they have announced basically that we are going to get. Flair comes back with a commercial. He's doing his thing. He gets a jackknife pin for a 2 count. And they announced that next week for the show, the day after the Royal Rumble, we are getting Macho Man versus the Repo Man. We're ending the feud the week after it happens. This is a 1-week feud. We're blowing off the feud right away.
Around the same time, the announcers are also hyping up the whole, this is the first time the winner of the Royal Rumble will get a title shot at WrestleMania.
Which is true, and personally, I'll go more in depth in this when we do our Royal Rumble episode. I'm not a fan of this idea that you get a guaranteed world title shot. I've never been a fan of that, and I'll save my rant why when we get to the actual match next episode. I'm not a fan of it. But yeah, this is the first Royal Rumble where the winner is guaranteed a world title shot at WrestleMania, which still goes on to this day, actually. And we start getting some classic Flair, where he gives Santana a thumb to the eye. He goes up to the top rope before he can do anything. Tito Santana catches him and launches him off the top rope. And I remember I was listening to a show and they were talking about Ric Flair and about why people always said, oh, he always did the same stuff every match. He did the flying nothing. And he ends up here right after this where he does that upside down flip in the corner to the outside.
Yeah, I saw that. He flipped over the turnbuckle, right?
Yeah, and those were classic Flairs. He did those almost every match, and people would always wonder why. And he told somebody the reason why he does that is that, people are going to come pay to see Ric Flair. They're going to come to see Russell. And when they come to pay to see somebody like Ric Flair, he knows what they want to come see, so he wants to make sure that they go home happy. So he does the flying nothing. He does the upside down corner flip because he knows he didn't want people to be disappointed by paying their hard-earned money to go watch wrestling and not get what they wanted to go see. So he did that almost every match.
Yeah, to use the wrestling language, he had his own spots he would do just for being him.
Yeah, because he knew that's what people wanted to see, so he made sure they got it.
Right.
And so after this, Santana hits a huge knee lift, and he hits his flying forearm finisher, and I'm not kidding. His flying forearm was called the flying burrito. True story. It started with when Jesse Ventura started calling that, and it just ended up adopted. You got a Mexican wrestler portraying a Spanish bullfighter hitting somebody with a finishing move called the flying burrito.
As you do.
Wrestling, folks.
Hashtag wrestling.
Yes, he goes for a second one, but Flair low bridges, sends Santana out of the ring. So here comes Mr. Perfect. He starts brawling with Flair.
Yeah, the bell never rings, but obviously the match is over at this point.
Yeah, it's a no contest, but I'm thinking it's obvious, and I know the ref sees that Flair and Perfect are throwing blows with each other, so obviously this should have been called, a DQ win for Ric Flair.
Right.
But not only do they brawl to the back with no bell, you can honestly see that Santana's also being helped to the back. And I'm like, we don't get an official finish to the match, we don't get a bell, so I'm assuming no contest?
Yeah.
Sure, maybe?
The time on that from when the first bell rings to the commercial break is 7 minutes 16 seconds.
And it was a good match, and they got a lot of stuff in. And they come back from commercial for this. This is our ending segment. We see that Perfect and Flair had fought all the way to the back. They come back for the commercial. Flair and Perfect are still fighting as they come back into the arena. Vince is on the mic with Flair about all this, and Flair challenges next week Mr. Perfect to a loser leaves WWE match.
Now, we see Mr. Perfect come out, and he accepts the challenge with his line of, "I am what I say I am, perfect."
Yes, and funny thing was, I actually remember watching this live at 10 years old. I still to this day remember watching this match on TV.
And then after that, the show ends with Repo Man towing Bartlett's car.
Yeah, that was the payoff of the car, and Repo Man just tows it. I'm like, great. I'm glad we got a payoff to that.
Again, Bartlett just he can't do it. He can't do this.
No, but overall, that aside, this was actually a much better show than last week's.
Yeah, if I was grading on a letter scale, I think I'd give this a B.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd give this a solid B. And there was only, like I said, this was only an hour. There was 3 matches. But yeah, I would give this a solid B. I would have to agree to that.
Nothing lingered. Everything got done in good time is how I'd put it.
Yeah, it wasn't too fast. It was basically, it's like the Three Bears. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. It was just right.
Good way to put it.
So, and that's our wrap up before they go to the Royal Rumble that following Sunday. So, we go from that to WCW Saturday Night.
That's going to be the evening of the 23rd.
Yes, and we open up with good old JR, Jim Ross, and Larry Zbyszko. They're on the 6th. That's going to be our commentators for the evening. They're also giving a short preview of the show, with the main event going to be a rematch of last week's U.S. title tournament final. Dustin Rhodes has already agreed to put the title on the line against Ricky Steamboat to give him a fair fight after what happened.
Now, as this is going on, JR and Larry are hyping up Cactus Jack and the Barbarian as being a surprisingly popular tag team.
Yeah, because Cactus Jack just turned face during the Clash of the Champions last week. So they're so by proxy, because Barbarian was Cactus Jack's tag partner, he's now face as well, and they're getting pretty decent cheers. And we're actually going to see them in action during this episode.
Now, we go right into the first match of the night, which is a tag team, Scotty Flamingo and Bob Cook versus Johnny B. Bad and Marcus Alexander Bagwell.
Yes, and then when you see the teams come out, and this is nothing against Bob Cook, but when you see a name wrestler and an enhancement talent going against 2 name wrestlers, you already know who's going to win.
Yeah, it seems pretty obvious in hindsight.
Sure, and then we're going to get Bob Cook and Johnny B. Bad to start, and obviously Bagwell and Bad have the speed and agility. Flamingo obviously was the agile as well because he was a former light heavyweight champion. So this was just a quick, Bad being super quick, tags in Bagwell, and they hit a nice double Japanese arm drag. And they're just starting out with their quick tags in and out, and Bad hits that sunset flip that he missed against Cactus Jack at the Clash of the Champions. You can see it's an absolutely gorgeous move. Hits that sunset flip, but it's broken up by Flamingo.
Now, as I'm watching these matches, just in general, I'm noting the pinfall counts in this time seem to be faster.
A little bit faster. So they come in, Flamingo starts laying the boots on, gets a nice snap suplex on Johnny B. Bad, who retaliates with a very solid sounding back elbow. Like, you can hear the thunk.
Yeah, that made me cringe a little bit.
Yeah, so obviously Scotty Schlegel plays it smart. He gets back in and he's tagging in Bob Cook. He's like, yeah, I'm good for now. Because we talked about this last week. Mark Miro, who played Johnny B. Bad, is a multiple-time Golden Gloves champion, so he knows how to throw hands.
Now, Bagwell's left arm is getting worked throughout the match, I'm noticing.
Yeah, and then there's a reason that Johnny B. Bad used a left hook as a finisher, because he was a fantastic amateur boxer in real life. So, yeah, so he goes in, starts working on Cook a little bit more. Bagwell comes in. He starts using his speed, but Cook lays him out with the right hand, just as solid sounding and looking as the other one.
After that, we have a series of rope bounces off the side, resulting in a flying collision, and both men are down, after which the ref starts counting surprisingly quickly.
And it breaks down quickly into a brawl, but Bob Cook goes for a hip toss that Marcus counter. He holds on, counters it into a backslide, and the good guys get the match win.
And that's a match time of 5 minutes, 47 seconds.
Yeah, it was a good starting match. It did what it needed to do. It got nothing awful into it. It was a good starting match.
Yeah, I was using the word dense a lot last time. This wasn't as dense as some of the other ones I've seen.
No, it wasn't dense, but it was still didn't drag or go too fast. I felt it got the time that it needed to tell the story.
Right.
So we go backstage with Tony Schiavone, who's back there with Barry Windham, and Tony Schiavone mentions the end of the U.S. title match where Dustin Rhodes won by countout because Barry Windham DDT'd Ricky Steamboat onto the concrete.
Yeah, Windham is hyping up Dustin Rhodes as the champion and says, quote, he did it all on his own, end quote, despite that we clearly saw what happened.
And then they also announced that at Super Brawl 3, because we're about a month out from Super Brawl 3, that Barry Windham is going to be facing NWA World Champion, the Great Muta, for the title.
You had mentioned you were a big fan of Great Muta growing up.
Oh, yeah, because when I was growing up, I've been watching wrestling since about 84, 85. We didn't have people like the Great Muta. Like, you get the smaller, like, Japanese wrestling's extremely popular in America right now.
Right, yeah. I had a subscription to New Japan for a while.
But we didn't see guys like the Great Muta. And so when you're a kid like me, you're 7, 8 years old, and you see this guy who's quick, does martial arts, because, martial arts and kung fu movies were popular back then, but when you see this guy with this face paint, doing martial arts, spitting green mist, and he was one of the first people I ever saw. He was the first person I ever saw do a moonsault. Blew my mind as a kid, so I've always been a fan. And to this day, the Great Muta still wrestles to this day. In 2022, we're in 1993. He was wrestling in the late 80s. We're in 2022. The Great Muta is still wrestling regularly.
That's something like 35 years on. That's really impressive.
Yeah. And it obviously he's slowed down a little bit because, once again, he's been doing this for well over 30 years. He can still go. He hasn't, this is not one of those, oh man, I wish he would retired. I was like, nah, man, if he can still go, let the man go.
Absolutely. After that segment, we talk about how Rick Rude has not given up the U.S. title belt despite being stripped of it because he did not defend it in good time.
Yeah, so the idea, because Dustin Rhodes obviously won the title last week because of the tournament, is now, it comes out without the belt. Rick Rude is mad that he was stripped. Usually, traditionally, it was champions had to defend their belt every 30 days or they would get stripped. Bill Watts says we gave him 60 days because of his injury. It's sad he's injured. We've confirmed he is injured, but we have to strip him of the title. He's not supposed to come back until March. But that's why Dustin doesn't have the belt, because Rick Rude has yet to give it up. And then they show the end of that title match from last week to continue that storyline.
Moving on from that, we have Vinny Vegas heading into the ring to face Chad Bird. You said Vegas was Kevin Nash, correct?
Yeah, this was Kevin Nash. This was towards the end of his first WCW run. He would become Shawn Michaels' bodyguard, who would end up becoming Diesel. He'd be in WWE as Diesel by the end of the year. And he's still doing the feud with Van Hammer as having the strongest arm in WCW. And he wastes no time with poor Chad Bird. Chad Bird has nothing chance. He comes in, beats him up thusly, hits the snake eyes. And if anybody ever wondered why that move where, especially Undertaker would do it a lot, where he would pick them up and drop them on their face on the turnbuckle and was called snake eyes, this is why.
I didn't realize there was a name for that.
It's called snake eyes, and obviously that's why it got the name from Vinny Vegas. He called it snake eyes because, for those that aren't familiar with gambling and casino terms, snake eyes, you roll double ones. You roll two, double ones. It's considered one of the worst rolls in gambling. So, snake eyes, that's why it's called snake eyes. Vinny Vegas, gambling, this, that, and the other.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Snake Eyes, match is over.
And that's 1 minute, 18 seconds.
We go into the next match, is Chris Benoit going up against Johnny Rich. And they get into the chain wrestling, which you guys know I'm always a big fan of. They do mention that not only was Benoit trained by Stu Hart in the dungeon, they don't mention Brett, Owen, anybody else. They mention that Stu Hart has trained other wrestlers.
I don't think there was as much of a rivalry at this point as there would be during the Monday Night Wars, but you still don't really want to mention a competitor.
Sure, and they also mentioned that Chris Benoit also had extensive time in Japan, which he did. That's where he got his name, made his name first in Japan. He was actually, for a while, he would wrestle as Chris Benoit, and he would also wrestle under a mask as the Pegasus Kid.
Didn't know that.
So this was actually a very even start. They Johnny Rich even got a little bit of chain wrestling in until Benoit clocked him with an enziguri in that famous Benoit clothesline.
Ooh, yeah, that was painful.
Benoit's going to take over, dominates. He actually hits a very nice second rope leg drop, which is not something we saw very often from Chris Benoit.
Yeah, and even that only results in a 2 count, though.
Yeah, so Johnny Rich actually took over for a little bit. Benoit went for a crucifix. Rich blocked it and actually landed a Samoan drop and got a 2 count. And was actually also able to hit a nice power slam for a close 2 count as well on Benoit.
And after that, Benoit is able to hit his bridging German for the pin. That's the Northern Light suplex, you said?
Dragon suplex.
Dragon suplex, my mistake. Yeah, that'll be a match time of 3 minutes, 45 seconds.
Yeah, I just like how he was able to spin around, grab a backslide, spin around, turn it into the full Nelson, land the Dragon suplex. And I thought that was a nice little finish on it.
That was a good sequence. Another match that wasn't dense, but it did what it needed to.
Sure, obviously we're just using this to get Benoit over as one of the new faces in WCW. So we head over to the Super Brawl 3 Control Center with they're showing a video package. We're promoting the Sting versus Vader title match, the White Castle of Fear. I believe it's within the next couple weeks. We are actually going to see the actual mini movie, White Castle of Fear. It's amazing.
I'll be looking forward to it.
Like, if you guys want to see this, not only are we going to show it here, a video I want to show is I'm a huge fan of Wrestling with Regret. I love that show. So Brian Zane actually sat with Cole Cabana, and they went over and riffed all 3 of the quote-unquote mini-movies, and this was the second one of the 3. And it's, for somebody like me who likes cheesy, bad movies, I adored this. So, and then we move on. We're going to mention now a little bit more talk about the NWA title match between Great Muta and Barry Windham. We do see the end of the match where Muta won the title with the moonsault, beating Masahiro Chono in Japan. And then they also continue that we're going to see Smoky Mountain tag champs, the Rock and Roll Express, are going to be meeting the Wrecking Crew at Super Brawl.
And there's also mentioned that the Rock and Roll Express will be present next episode to scout them out.
And speaking of which, we are going to see the Wrecking Crew in action. They come out to face the Italian Stallion and good old Larry Santo. Fury and Stallion tried this out. They try to outmuscle each other because Italian Stallion was a good size, and they do mention his AAU wrestling pedigree. He was apparently an accomplished amateur wrestler.
Yeah, that's always a good background to have going into theatrical wrestling like this.
It actually started out pretty even until they tagged in Santo, who quickly loses the advantage to Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, Santo gets power slammed by Rage and tags Fury in.
So, and then what happens is that Santo comes in, starts throwing some drop kicks, they always say, don't go to the well too often. He did. He missed one. They smacked him out of the air, hit the wrecking ball. Match is over.
4 minutes and 6 seconds.
And after the match, Larry Zbyszko's out there doing an interview. They basically say that after Super Brawl, they name some of the WCW tag teams. They're like, hey, we're coming for the titles.
Yeah, they specifically call out Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas.
Yeah, who's the current tag champs. But they're basically like, hey, if you're a tag team, we're going to go through you. We're winning the belts. We go from that interview, we go into what they had this for a short while. I do actually remember this as a kid. They called them underdog matches. And basically what it was is they would take some of the enhancement talent and let them wrestle each other. And they say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to give them a shot to wrestle each other on TV. Maybe we can let them move up the ladder, try to find some new faces. And that's basically what it was. Enhancement talents fighting each other.
It's a good concept.
Yeah. And so we get Pat Rose and a new face. I believe this was one of his first, if not first, television appearances, Robbie V. And if that name does not sound familiar, but he looks familiar, because Robbie V is none other than Rob Van Dam.
That's another name I had heard growing up, but I never knew who it was.
Oh, ever since ECW, to this day, I am still an absolutely huge fan of Rob Van Dam. But this was, Robbie V is Rob Van Dam really early on. I believe this was his first, if not one of his first TV appearances, period.
Yeah, JR and Larry are talking about how they've seen Pat before, but Robbie is in fact new.
Sure. And so they're going to show that Robbie V is using his martial arts skills and flexibility to take an early advantage.
Yeah, I noted that he's barefoot in this.
Yeah, that was just the thing he did when he first started out. Because, apparently all martial artists fight barefoot, apparently. He actually also popped up, this was something that's kind of surprised me because you normally didn't see a lot of this in 93, was he popped off a really nice springboard crossbody on Pat Rose, who finally, after a boot in the corner, took over. It was just, there was nothing other than the stuff that Robbie V was doing. Pat Rose was obviously the bad guy in this match, but he did a lot of... There was nothing spectacular in this match other than the martial arts stuff that Rob Van Dam... It's RVD, damn it. I know this is his name, but he wasn't Robbie V for very long. He ended up becoming Rob Van Dam. That was his original name anyways. So, RVD.
Yeah, Pat's left arm is getting worked real hard throughout the match.
Yeah, and so basically, Pat Rose takes over for a little bit, but then all of a sudden, RVD gets him, grabs his arm, starts throwing some quick kicks, get back in control. He ends up hitting a front power slam, split-legged moonsault, match is over.
And that's going to be a match time of 5 minutes and 54 seconds.
Yeah, honestly, RVD was the highlight. This was a lot of stuff we'd end up seeing him doing years later, but it was just nice to see basically his first ever TV appearance.
Is he still wrestling?
I don't know if he's fully retired, but I haven't seen him wrestle in a while, but he still looks like he's in decent shape that he could probably make an appearance, but I think he's all but retired. He actually does have a CBD product line because we knew that Rob Van Dam's always been a advocate of marijuana.
I did not know that.
But no, he actually has from what I've seen, a successful CBD line of CBD products. But he still looks like he could go. He still looks in about the same shape as he always has been.
All right, now moving on from that match, we're going to flash back to Clash of the Champions, and Ricky Steamboat and St. Douglas are going to call out Brian Pillman and Stunning Steve Austin, saying, "You started this war, we'll finish it anytime, any place."
Yeah, and the great thing, though, not only because they were both good at cutting the promo, the image of Shane Douglas with a bandage over his head, still covered in blood, I thought was great. You see how mad he is, all bandaged up. You also got to remember, 1993, this was basic cable. You didn't see a lot of very bloody wrestlers with bandages like this. So I thought it was a really good image. He's yelling. He's like, "Go ahead. We're going to fight. You started it. We're going to finish it, bloody or not." And I liked it.
I agree. Good visual, good promo.
So we come back from commercial. We see Harley Race, who is managing Paul Orndorff and WCW champ Big Van Vader. Basically, Orndorff and Vader warn their opponents, Johnny Gunn and Tom Zank. Yeah, we're warning you because we're going to hurt you and we're going to hurt you bad. This is... You guys are making a mistake fighting us. But then they also continue to call out the people they're feuding with Orndorff calling out Cactus Jack and Vader calling out Sting, which takes us into the match itself, the tag match between Johnny Gunn and Tom Zank versus Paul Orndorff and Big Van Vader, who are accompanied by former world champion Harley Race.
All right, the match is going to start off with Zank and Paul Orndorff. They do some side headlock, rope bounces. Paul gets kicked in the head.
Yeah, a very nice enziguri. Gunn tags in, and Orndorff quickly takes over, and I felt bad for Gunn because here comes Big Van Vader, who absolutely just batters Johnny Gunn in the corner. Watching the way he just absolutely treated not only Gunn right now, but Zank later in the match, Van Vader seems like a Dark Souls boss.
Oh my, I think that is an apt comparison.
Where it's like, you can beat him, sure. Could you beat him? Sure, eventually. But he's going to hit you with about 3 moves and you're dead. And you can see how tough and how brutal Van Vader is in here. And I don't think people realize, just especially when he was in Japan, because he made his name, he's another one that made his name in Japan, how much pain he can take and how violent he can get. And a perfect example of this, and this is a classic moment in wrestling, he had a match with Stan Hansen, who I considered had the greatest lariat of all time. Early in the match, they're battering each other. This is a true story. You can find the match easy on YouTube. Big Van Vader's eye pops out of his socket.
What?
Yes. So what does he do? He pushes the eye back in.
Oh my gosh.
The eye is just swollen shut. It pops out, he pops it back in, and then finishes the match against Stan Hansen.
That's some guts.
It's crazy. Like, you can easily find this match on YouTube, but yeah. Vader was no joke when it came. That's why he said it feels like if you're fighting Vader, it feels like you're fighting a Dark Souls boss. But yeah, Orndorff comes back in. I'm surprised. I know Orndorff could go, he could wrestle, but I was surprised on how nice his dropkick was.
Oh yeah, that was beautiful.
But yeah, so Zank finally gets to tag in, but instantly gets in trouble. And Vader then comes back in and gives Tom Zank basically the same treatment that he gave Johnny Gunn.
Yeah, Vader does a twisting suplex. I'm not sure if there's a specific name for that.
Oh, I don't think so. Basically, it started out with a vertical suplex, but as he fell back, he twisted him so Zank landed on his front, not his back.
Gotcha.
He tried to get a sunset. He gets Orndorff come back in. He tries to get a sunset flip. Orndorff negates it, but Zank's able to get an actual cross body on him.
Yeah, just gets a 2 count out of that.
Sure. He's able to tag in Vader. And he actually is able to stun Vader, because when Vader rushes in, he catches him right on the chin with a kick, get a couple blows in, and he tags Johnny Gunn, who gets into the same Santo problem by throwing one too many drop kicks. Vader just bats him out of the air, hits a huge splash, powerbomb, the good old Fire Thunder powerbomb for the win. And as this is going on, Zank is given a pile driver by Paul Orndorff onto the outside. Yeah,
Orndorff running the interference so Vader can finish the job.
Sure, so match is over with the powerbomb.
And that's a 6-minute, 38-second match.
Yes. So we come back, they have a sit-down interview with Tony Schiavone with Sting in full-on regalia, face paint, jacket, all this. And they're promoting this is the big feud of the moment right now, so we're still continuing promoting Sting versus Vader. They talk about where Sting lost the title to Vader in 92. They show some footage from that. Then they also talk about Starrcade, where Sting was actually able to beat Vader in the King of Cable finals. But this is all it's doing. They're building up. Obviously, this is going to be your big match, your big feud of your upcoming pay-per-view, so you're going to try to promote it the best you can. I think they're doing a great job with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, really building toward that White Castle of Fear match.
Yeah, which, once we get to the actual mini-movie for it, is mwah.
All right, moving into our next match, we have Too Cold Scorpio versus Barry Windham.
Yeah, and what I noticed right off the bat, Scorpio pushes Windham right in the corner right away, and Windham retaliates by slapping the upper lip and taste right out of his mouth. Like, the sound of that smack was just like, oh my god.
Oh yeah, that was nasty.
They go a little bit back and forth. Scorpio gets a really cool roll-up, lands a spin kick, and then Barry Windham takes a powder to the outside.
Yeah, Scorpio then attacks him with a rope sling.
Mm-hmm. And then he goes for that momentum, like, we're doing the speed versus power thing, because Barry Windham's several inches taller than Too Cold Scorpio. I believe Barry Windham was 6'6", 6'7". He was a very tall gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
So when Scorpion runs at him, he presses him up in the air like that, and with Barry's extension, you're probably looking at, and then Scorpion comes back down, you look like that was probably at least a good 8-foot drop.
Youch.
Like I said, Barry Windham was well over 6 foot tall.
Yeah, so Barry's in control, hits that suplex for a 2 count. Scorpio does some rope bounces and goes for a sunset flip. That gets a 2 count as well.
So yeah, we're going back and forth. We're trading suplexes, we're trading roll-ups, and we get through. It looks like some sort of a Scorpio goes for some sort of like slingshot, like flipping splash. He misses it. Barry Windham is able to answer with the top rope axe handle, implant DDT. Match is over.
And that's a 5-minute, 8-second match.
Sure, and this wasn't a squash that went back and forth, but obviously we're pushing Barry Windham to make him look good for his title matchup against the Great Muta, and they use this as like Barry Windham is using a match against somebody like Scorpio to kind of like work on strategies for his match against Muta coming up in about a month.
Right. Next segment is Cactus Jack and the Barbarian calling out Vader and Orndorff in an interview.
And once again, if you guys have heard Cactus Jack interviews, you've heard the Mick Foley interviews, loved it. It was great. And one of my favorite parts is that he's talking about, his neck and the snap, crackle, and pop, and he specifically used the term sadistic Rice Krispies.
Oh my.
Yeah, I love this promo. one thing Mick Foley could always do was cut a promo, and if you notice, once he had the three faces of Foley, a Mankind promo, a Dude Love promo, and a Cactus Jack promo were three completely different promos.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and they're talking about their opponents, which we come into that next match. Tex Slazenger and Shanghai Pierce versus Cactus Jack and the Barbarian.
Pierce and Jack are going to be the ones to start this match.
Sure, but Tex Slazenger and Shanghai Pierce would go on in a few years to become the Godwins in WWF, the Pig Farmers, the Phineas I. Godwin, Henry O. Godwin, so their initials were Pig and Hog. And Slazenger would also become Midian in the Ministry of Darkness, so they would be in the WWF in the next 2 or 3 years.
Gotcha. This seems like a pretty standard tag match as it goes on. The announcers are talking up Barbarian's agility for how big he is.
Yeah, well, he was always... And by the way, to this day, he still makes appearances at some indie shows and a lot of like conventions and signings. And this is probably a good 29, 30 years ago. Barbarian still looks roughly the same.
Yeah, some people just age like a fine wine.
Well, no, you can I'm talking like he's still muscular like that. He's still jacked like that.
Oh, that's what you meant.
Yeah, like obviously his hair's grayer and obviously he's gotten older, but he's still jacked.
Gotcha.
So, and basically like this was, what I noticed right off the bat is, you said Cactus Jack and Shanghai Pierce start things, keeping it even. Slazenger tags in, but Jack's like, nah, bro. So he gets on the apron, decides to start trading blows on the apron instead of waiting for him to come in.
Right. This is possibly laying the seeds for a feud, or there was a feud going.
No. This is just helping to promote, Jack and Barbarian. That was just how Jack's style was. He's like, screw it. I'm gonna use my body as a weapon, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, well, shit, I tried.
Later on in the match, we have CJ and Barb tagging back and forth, and then Barbarian gets somehow muscled over to the hostile corner, and Pierce is tagged in, and we get a chain wrestling sequence, lots of wrist locks and reversals.
And they try to double team Barbarian, but he comes in and just clotheslines them both at the same time.
Yeah, Barbarian ducks that and knocks both of them down.
Sure, and then through all this, he comes in, Barbarian misses a rope attack. He went for one, got it, missed the second one. Pierce tags in, but Barbarian instantly catches him with a power slam for a 2 count. And then we get to the finish where Cactus Jack goes to hook in his double arm DDT finisher on Slazenger. Pierce comes in, he backdrops Pierce while having the DDT locked in, backdrops him, and then lands the DDT for the win.
More recent wrestling fans will recognize the double underhook DDT. Jon Moxley, when he was in WWE as Dean Ambrose, used that as Dirty Deeds. Yeah,
it's the double arm DDT that he's been using as Cactus Jack and Mankind for 30 years.
Right. And that match was 5 minutes, 13 seconds long, and I think that, again, that was a good match.
Yeah, well, like, it wasn't spectacular, but like I said, it was good. Everybody got a chance to get stuff in, and it did its job. And we go into the main event, and I was excited to see this, and I was not disappointed. It was for the U.S. title, Dustin Rhodes defending the U.S. title against Ricky Steamboat, and it was a lot of the same as the matches last week, and I'm not complaining. If you guys heard me talk about how great that last match was last week, we got a lot of the same here.
Just solid wrestling.
And the basic stuff, and you can honestly see why to this day both of them are still highly respected as teachers in wrestling.
Dustin Rhodes is in fact still active in AEW at this point.
And he's actually one of their teachers, and Ricky Steamboat helped teach during the FCW time when FCW was there before NXT. And Steamboat is actually another one of those that's in my top 5, Ricky Steamboat. And it was just, this match is extremely equal that, obviously Ricky Steamboat had the speed, but Dustin Rhodes was still very fast for his size.
Absolutely.
And then obviously you knew that Dustin Rhodes had the strength advantage. Ricky Steamboat was surprisingly strong in his own aspect.
So this was an even match more or less the entire time.
Yeah, like this was basically, and there was a point where they countered a hip toss into a hip toss into a hip toss into a hip toss, spilled into the ring, and you saw it got a little heated. They start shoving each other, going nose to nose.
Yeah, even if you're good friends in something like this, I can imagine it getting heated.
Sure, absolutely, and that's what this was. They're basically just like, hey, we have until TV time remaining, so obviously want to get this in before the episode's over. So yeah, basically this was just, there's not much more to say about this match that we didn't say last week. Absolutely fantastic. So we go in, Rhodes went for the Bulldog, and Steamboat countered it through him, and then basically as soon as that happened, the bell rang because, hey, the episode's over, TV time remaining. There's no more TV time remaining, so we call this as a draw.
Right, and that was an 8-minute, 59-second, very good match.
Yeah, like it was just as entertaining as the last one. And it didn't bother me that it was a draw. Usually a lot of times you get a draw, people boo. It's like, no, it's great. It continued the feud. There wasn't really a feud, but it can still continue the whole the storyline from last week. Both the guys looked absolutely fantastic. You can tell, like, wow, these guys are considered some of the most, to this day, some of the most respected in the sport ever. And it's because of matches like this.
Yeah, they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew what the other could do. They made it work.
Yeah, and they showed that they even though they were good friends, you know, in WCW, that they didn't let that get between them when they, you know, obviously both of them wanted to be United States champion, and it went to a draw. Yeah,
like Ron Simmons said a couple weeks ago, holding the title is addictive.
Yeah. Overall, the show was good. I actually had a good time watching this show. Obviously, at least to me, this was the match of the night for this as well.
Absolutely, match of the night. On the whole show, my letter grade scale again, I'd give this an A-.
You know what? Honestly, absolutely, I was going to say the exact same thing. Both shows were actually, neither show from this week's Saturday night or last week's was bad, but this one was better, and I thought both shows overall were better than last week. Their counterparts last week.
Yeah, both shows in this episode were a step up from last time.
So, that is the week of January 18th, 1993 for the Dropkicks and Attractions podcast. Next week, we are coming into the attractions part where we talk about the Bill Murray Classic Groundhog Day.
Now, you had never seen this before the podcast, correct?
Surprisingly not. Like I said, I'm a huge Harold Ramis fan, Bill Murray fan, Ghostbuster Stripes. Surprisingly, have never seen this movie.
I hadn't seen it either, but I don't watch a lot of movies anyway.
Yes. So, and then in 2 weeks, will be the next Dropkicks part of the DNA podcast, where we talk about Royal Rumble 1993. We are giving, as we explained in our first episode, we are giving pay-per-views their own special episode. So we will be talking about the 1993 Royal Rumble in length. And then after that, we will be talking about a movie that I'm a big fan of, and I'm excited for you to watch just because I just know how you are. We will be talking about the great movie True Romance, directed by Tony Scott, written by Quentin Tarantino. Absolute stellar cast. I'm excited to see this because I know you don't watch a lot of movies like this, so I'm excited because I know some of the stuff that happens in this movie.
Yeah, I will be going into this completely blind.
Yes, and it's just, we've already talked about it. My favorite part of the movie, and if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. There's a scene where it's just Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper talking, and if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And as crazy as that movie is, just those two guys talking is my favorite part of the movie.
Alrighty, I'll be looking forward to it.
So, you can find us on YouTube, where we will be every Friday at noon. And every Saturday will be the podcast. Right now, we're on Spotify. We're on Stitcher. We're working on getting in on the Google Podcast. Basically, any podcast site that we use through Anchor, we're going to put it there. And if there's any other podcast site you guys listen to that you want to see us on, let us know. We'll do what we can. You can find the podcast on Twitter at D and A Podcast 1. You can find me on all the social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, Hover, at Xander Invictus. Basically, if it's a social media site I'm on, always look for Xander Invictus. You're going to find me.
And I can be found at BigBoct on most of the same socials.
So, once again, thank you, everybody, for coming to listen to episode 3 of the Dropkicks and Attractions podcast, and we will see you next week for Groundhog Day.
Take care, everybody.